Hello viewers and welcome to Skeptics in the Hub. We have the subject tonight is something that's very popular even from a very young age, dinosaurs. And we have a great expert with us tonight from the Natural History Museum in London. It is Dr. Susie Maidment. Hello, Susie.
Hi, John. How are you?
I'm fine. How the devil are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It's very nice to be here tonight.
Okay, yes. Well, this is a terrific opportunity because I've got children who have, they've loved dinosaurs since they were born, it seems. Difficult to imagine, but that's what it seems like. And the first question I want to ask you is, what is a dinosaur?
What is a dinosaur? Okay, well, actually, that's not as straightforward to explain as you might expect. So dinosaurs obviously were animals that lived during the Mesozoic period, which is from about 230 to 66 million years ago. But not every animal that was alive then was a dinosaur, of course. There were also reptiles that were early mammals or mammal-like reptiles. And of course, there were lizards and there were crocodiles and crocodilomorphs and things like that as well. So dinosaurs are characterized by a series of features of the hip bones and the feet, which mean that they held their legs underneath their bodies, so in a kind of upright position. So if you imagine, I can't do this without miming, so forgive the mime, but if you imagine like lizards and crocodiles, they kind of walk with their arms out to the side like that. Yeah. Whereas dinosaurs have their legs underneath their bodies, so they walked with their legs underneath their bodies, a bit more like mammals do. And that's a really characteristic feature of the dinosaurs.
Well, I like to think of it as, wheels. A car has wheels that stick out sideways, but maybe a crane is up on, tall legs that go down.
It's a good analogy. Yeah.
Sort of an engineering alternative view. Yeah. So, okay, we know what they are now. They're reptiles, but their legs go downwards.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So there's so many questions we need to ask you here, because they mysteriously became extinct, or did they?
Well, dinosaurs aren't actually extinct. The non-bird dinosaurs are extinct, but birds are actually dinosaurs. So birds evolved from the dinosaurs, and that means that in a biological sense, they are actually dinosaurs. So the dinosaurs aren't extinct. They're actually the most speciose terrestrial vertebrate today, with over 10,000 living species. So, dinosaurs are all around us. They're with us every day. But the non-avian dinosaurs, so the ones that we tend to think of as sort of big scaly things wandering around in the Jurassic, they are extinct, but probably not so mysteriously. We have a pretty good idea of why they went extinct, and that's, I guess, most people will be familiar with the meteorite that hit the Earth at the end of the Cretaceous period. So most paleontologists are now very comfortable with that being the reason that the dinosaurs died out.
Yes, we have more bird dinosaurs, avian dinosaurs still around than we have mammals, don't we? I mean, there's only about 4,000 mammals, and most of them are bats.
That's absolutely right. Birds actually really dominate our ecosystems today, and they are dinosaurs.
Yes, fantastic. So I'm going to put a notice up now to remind people that if they want to ask a question, rather than just chat amongst themselves, we'd like them to put a Q in front of their comment. Great. Okay, so are the dinosaurs, the problem with them is that we only know them through their fossils. And so that's a misrepresentation of their number, their geography, their location, because not many things fossilize. What sort of fossils of dinosaurs do you have?
Yeah, that's totally true. A question that I get asked a lot by people is, but are there very many dinosaurs still to find? And of course, there are an enormous number of fossils that we have yet to find a new species of dinosaur, because they lived on every continent, and they were around for 170 million years, so for a really, really long time. And as you say, our fossil record is highly biased. and it's biased by where we look for fossils. So obviously here in the UK and in North America, we've been looking intensively for dinosaur fossils for probably 150 years. But in other parts of the world, the study of dinosaurs and the discovery of dinosaurs is really in its infancy. And so we have a very unevenly sampled fossil record geographically. Now, of course, we also have, through time, we have rocks that are deposited on land, which is where we find dinosaurs, and then rocks that are deposited in the sea. And there were no dinosaurs that lived all of their lives in the sea. So if we have marine rocks of a particular time period, then we're very unlikely to find dinosaur fossils in them. So we have uneven sampling through time. And then, of course, as you say, not everything fossilizes when it dies. So that means that, big things, they tend to stand a better chance of being fossilized because their big bones might be able to withstand geological forces over time. But smaller things might just get crushed and ground up and disappear, and we will never have a fossil record of those.
Yeah. So first of all, they've got to get fossiled, which is quite a high hurdle anyway, because most dead creatures rot or get predated. Is it predated or scavenged? Yeah. Technically, scavenged if they're already dead. Yeah. So that's the first hurdle that a fossil has to jump over. It has to die somewhere that it will be preserved from decay. And the next hurdle it has to jump over is it has to be found. And we can only look for it at outcrops, like Kimmeridge, for example, where the chalk at the cliff has been crumbling for centuries.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I live here in Sussex, where some of the first dinosaurs were found. And the ground underneath me here is absolutely full of dinosaur fossils. Yes. But the problem is that it's all covered in trees and houses. So we don't find them very often. We do find them at the coast where the cliffs erode. So places like Hastings and also on the Isle of Wight, we have the same rocks as we do here. And that's where we find the dinosaurs, where they're being weathered out. Now, if we go over to places like Utah and Wyoming in the US, which is a place where I spend a lot of time, where I do a lot of work, the rocks there are obviously much better exposed because it's a desert. So there's much less vegetation. There's virtually no people. Wyoming's the size of the UK and has a population of 400,000 people. It's about the same size of Edinburgh, I believe, the population. So, really there's nobody there. And so there's a lot of opportunity to find stuff. There's lots more rock exposed, and there's no trees and buildings and houses and stuff like that. So.
No NIMBYs.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. So actually, we had an earlier show on paleontology in general, and I invited Alex and Dr. Martin Munt, who you may know from Dinosaur Isle, and he used to work at your same establishment for a while, and I did invite them to come tonight, but I don't know whether it was a bit of a late invitation, to be honest. So I don't know whether they're going to be able to make it, but they have been sent an invitation. You might meet them on screen if they turn up.
Yeah. No, we're a relatively small community, actually, people that work in dinosaurs. You can imagine there's not tons of us, so we do tend to all know each other. Yeah.
Yes. Grouped together. Yes. So you're absolutely right. There's probably millions of dinosaurs underneath Sussex, but they're just too deep. We're never going to find them, and it wouldn't be feasible to mine for them either. Although you do find some fossils during mining, don't you?
You can do. Some of the really early fossils. So some of the first really complete specimens of dinosaurs were actually found in a coal mine in Belgium. So they were iguanodon, and again, they were actually found in the same group of rocks that we have here in Sussex. They were found over in Belgium. Some coal miners were digging down, and they found effectively a herd of fossilized iguanodon specimens in a coal mine. So that was really cool. And actually in Canada, there's been some discoveries, a really cool one recently of a beautiful armored dinosaur that they actually found whilst excavating or quarrying there. But the problem is that, in the olden days, we used to find a lot of fossils like that. So all of the quarries were worked by hand, and the quarrymen would spot the fossils. So a lot of the fossils that we have from the UK in, I'm sorry, my computer has just decided to shut itself down, so I'm just going to re-log in. My password.
You're still here.
Okay, that's good to know. I can't. So there we go. We're back. Sorry about that. Yeah. So a lot of the fossils that we have in the Natural History Museum, historic fossils of things like iguanodon from the UK, were actually found by quarrymen when the Weald and the rocks down here were being quarried for stone by hand. But of course, now these rocks are quarried by enormous equipment, and so the fossils just get destroyed.
Yes,
so
yes,
we
don't
find them in the same way.
We don't do mining or quarrying carefully now, do we? We do it with explosives and vast machines. That's not going to help.
No, that is true. So yeah, it's difficult to find things here these days. Yeah.
So tell me a bit about yourself. How did you get to be the you are today?
Okay, so this story sounds like it's not true, but it actually is true. I promise. When I was about 6, my grandpa, who was a very clever man, he was an electrical engineer, he said to me, "What are you going to be when you grow up?" It's a very serious conversation. And I, at the time, wasn't sure whether I was going to be a scientist or a princess. Now, which is completely reasonable, I think you'll agree. And him being a very, he was very, very keen to persuade me away from princess and encourage me into scientist. So he said, "What sort of scientist are you going to be?" But I was 6 and I hadn't realised that there were different sorts of scientists. Yes. So he said, "Well, why don't you be a dinosaur scientist? I love dinosaurs. I have plastic dinosaurs and a dinosaur money box and a blow up Stegosaurus." So he said, "Well, why don't you be a dinosaur scientist?" So I said, "Okay, I will." So I did. So that made a lot of sort of, those awkward careers discussions at school where you've got GCSEs and your A levels and what are you going to do at university. It did make all of that a bit more straightforward for me because I did know what I was going to do since I was 6. So.
I don't know many people who chose their career at the age of 6.
Well, actually, when you talk to dinosaur workers, surprisingly, a large number did decide age 6 that was what they were going to do. So.
Wow. Yeah. So that's a sort of fossilized career choice. So your specialism, Stegosaurs?
Yeah. I work on sort of broadly all of the bird-hip dinosaurs. So the bird-hip dinosaurs are a group of dinosaurs which include things like Triceratops, so the horned and frilled dinosaurs, Iguanodon with the thumb spikes, the hadrosaurs with the crests, and as you say, the armored dinosaurs. Yeah. So the plated cool. Dinosaurs, the Stegosaurs, and the Ankylosaurs, which are the kind of small armored tank-like walking coffee tables with tail clubs.
What's that crest for?
That's an excellent question, John. We don't know, but there are obviously some different ideas. It could be for display. So it could be that we have males and females with slightly different shaped crests. Very difficult to tell in the fossil record whether that's right or not, because we just don't have the sample sizes, and often we don't have the age control to know whether we're looking at 2 different species or males and females of the same same species, and we can't tell the sex of dinosaurs either. So very difficult to tell that. It could be. So somebody did a really cool. My colleagues in Canada did a really cool experiment where they did some beautiful CT scanning of the skull of one of these hadrosaurs, and they looked at all the air cavities, so the nasal bones, the nose bones extend right the way up into the, and they actually kind of digitally or virtually blew air through this crest, and it made a honking noise. And they showed that the smaller, the juveniles, actually had a kind of higher pitched honking noise than the adults. So maybe it was a communication device, and maybe that was for some sort of interest-specific type display function or chatting function as well. So we don't really know, to be honest with you. But many weird things in nature seem to be to do with sex. So I wouldn't put it. I wouldn't be surprised if it was something to do with interest-specific display.
Well, it's no more weird than a cockerel's comb compared to a hen's lesser comb, and all the wattles that they have. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
many birds have these sorts of display structures. So yeah.
Yes. I love that hypothesis of the musical instrument.
Yeah.
And of course, it makes sense in audio terms for the small ones to be high pitched and the large ones to be deeper.
But one of the really cool things that we can do now, there's a lot of technology that is applied to paleontology now, and I think some people think of us as being a kind of like dusty old subject. One of my colleagues, who's a geologist, once disparagingly suggested that all we do is look at fossils and write down what they look like. But actually, we do a lot more than that. We apply a lot of different techniques to study our fossils, and CT scanning has really revolutionized a lot of the way that we can look at these things, and so we can do experiments like that and actually find out what might have happened.
Yes, absolutely. Well, of course, early biology, back in the days of nature study, it was purely observation, wasn't it? We had no biochemical or microbiological equipment to investigate further than the morphology of organisms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you said something earlier about land dinosaurs, and you sort of implied that maybe there weren't very many watery ones, no aquatic dinosaurs. But what about plesiosaurs?
Plesiosaurs aren't dinosaurs. Yeah, they're marine reptiles. So they're reptiles that lived at the same time as dinosaurs. But remember, earlier I said dinosaurs have these legs underneath their bodies, and plesiosaurs don't. They have these flippers, held out to the sides of their bodies, and they're probably more closely related to lizards than they were to dinosaurs. Actually,
yes, that makes sense.
Yeah, although it's a bit difficult to tell, but probably.
Looking at the body plan, that does make sense, doesn't it? Yes. So I get a lot of people who say fossils are no evidence for evolution because you weren't there, and you can't say that fossil A turned into fossil B because all you have is a gappy record, and all you're doing is making inferences, guesses, rather than actual evidence. What are you going to say to them?
Okay, there's so many answers to that, but let's start with the fact that there's no proof of anything in any science except for potentially maths. Everything else we propose hypotheses and then we test them, and all we can do is disprove something, leaving only one solution. So there is no proof in science. So that's the first one. So we could if we're going to use that argument, that it applies to all of science.
Thank heavens to Popper.
Yes. So there's this idea that there's no missing links, which I've never really understood, because every single fossil is a missing link between something else. I mean, what do you want? Like every time, there are even in the dinosaur fossil records, particularly in places like in Alberta in Canada from about 75 million years ago, the fossil record and the dating of the sediments is so incredible and is at such incredible high resolution. Fabulous work, done by some of my colleagues at the Royal Tyrrell Museum have just done some beautiful work on the stratigraphy there, and you can actually see these hadrosaurs with their crests that we've been talking about. You can see one form, the crest slowly changing shape, and over time as you go up through the formation, and it looks like the same species, but it's slowly, gradually, the crests are changing shape. And actually, species are an entirely human construct.
Yes,
they come from our need to have to envelope something and to call it a name.
Boxes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so of course there's not a missing link between this one and this one, because we've artificially separated them into two boxes. But actually when you look at the fossil record, it's very, very clearly you can see these transitional series in places like that. But every fossil in the end is a missing link between two others. It doesn't make any sense. I've never understood those.
Yes. And if you could go forward and look back in time, we'd be a missing link.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Because evolution hasn't stopped.
Yeah.
So it's like a frozen movie, isn't it? You've got a strip of film, and you can look at the slides, the individual frames, and see the changes. So there's there are two sorts of evidence for evolution, isn't there? There's evidence of change actually happening, which we can see with short lifespan creatures like bacteria and fruit flies and things like that. Mm-hmm. And then there's here's a record of what happened in the past. What's the most likely explanation for all these physical objects? And that is they changed. It's change.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it's sort of applying change in the past. That's all. Right, now you said something else, I think, about, oh, no, you didn't say this, but I'm going to say this. What color are dinosaurs?
What color are dinosaurs? That's a great question.
Of course, all the depictions that we had, certainly in my childhood, when color printing hadn't been invented, they were all grey.
They were all black and white, yeah. Well, it is a great question. And if you'd asked me that question maybe 10 years ago, I would have said, we don't know and we'll never know the answer. But I would have been wrong because fairly recently, well, as I say, in the last decade, people started to identify structures in feathers. So fossilized feathers. So obviously, we discussed that birds are dinosaurs. So many of the meat-eating dinosaurs were feathered, and we have their feathers preserved. And when people started to use very high-powered microscopes to look at the feathers, they discovered cellular structures that are melanosomes. So these are the cells that bear color, that bear melanin in living bird feathers. And these, in living bird feathers, these cells, the shape of the cell determines the color or correlates with the color of the feather. Now, you can only do this with some colors. So you can only do it with kind of browns and grays. Also iridescence, it depends on how the melanosomes are stacked. So you can't see things like blues and yellows like this, but you can see browns and reds and grays and blacks. And what they found was that these same shaped melanosomes were being seen in these fossil feathers as well. So they were able to identify fossil feathers that were red and that were brown and black and iridescent and things like this. And so there's been some lovely work where you've got stripy feathers and you've got a dinosaur with a sort of red part on its head and then black parts on its body. At the moment, so there's been some suggestion that you can also do this with scaly skin, although that's a little bit more up for debate. So we can see melanosomes in scaly skin, but there's been some suggestion that actually in living reptiles, the shape of the melanosome doesn't correlate so well to the color in living animals with scaly skin. So it's a little bit more up for debate. But there's been a lot of work done recently on counter shading. So that's the kind of, if you imagine a deer where it's got a kind of brown back and then a white underbelly. There's been a bit of work done that suggested that there's been a few herbivorous dinosaurs that might have had that kind of colouring based on melanosomes. But as I say, we won't be able to see the blues and the yellows and the pinks and the oranges like that. So we can get an idea of what some of the dinosaur colours might have been. But maybe some of the more exotic colours we can still leave up to our imagination. So if you want, we can still have like a red and purple striped Stegosaurus. That's fine.
So we're pretty sure that they had colour, a few colours, but the jury is still out upon a full spectrum.
Yeah, and well, it's difficult because those colours are formed differently. They're not formed from melanosomes, and so the soft tissues, the proteins that cause those colours in the skin and in the fossils aren't preserved in the fossil record. We haven't found them in the fossil record yet. So that's the problem at the moment, is that we can't see those colours. I mean, we can go to analogy. So we can look at living reptiles, and we can look at living mammals, and we can say, what sorts of colours do we do? What do animals usually do? And herbivores, they don't really want to be eaten, so they tend to go for camouflage. Predators don't really want herbivores to see them, so they also tend to go for camouflage. The chances are that dinosaurs had sort of that sort of. They probably weren't purple and red striping. But,
they might have been a bit like mammals, in which case some of them can see colour and some of them can't.
the only way we can determine things like that is basically to look at their closest living relatives. So that's a good way of doing it. And the closest living relatives of the dinosaurs are the birds and the crocodiles. So if we know that birds can see in color and crocodiles can see in color, then birds and crocodiles share a common ancestor that dinosaurs also share. So we can be pretty certain that dinosaurs also saw in color. Off the top of my head, I have no idea whether crocodiles see in color or not, actually. I'm pretty sure birds can, but I don't know about crocodiles, so I have to get back to you on that one.
Right. Yeah, it would be stupid for birds not to be able to see in color when they are so brightly colored themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
For sexual purposes.
Yeah.
Iridescence. Now, doesn't that depend upon very tiny layers of reflective surfaces that the light bounces about inside? And
now I am a geologist, John. My computer has just closed itself down again. Sorry.
So what I'm heading towards is, have we been able to find surfaces of dinosaurs that are physically constructed in a way that would provide iridescence?
Well, okay, so as I say, I'm a geologist, so my background is rocks, so bear with me. But it's not biology, but the melanosomes, of the stacking pattern of the melanosomes in the feathers, when they're stacked in a certain way, that's what causes iridescence in living birds. And they have seen that same stacking pattern in dinosaur feathers.
Okay.
So that has led people to suggest. Now, don't ask me about the physics of how that actually works, because that is beyond me.
Well, I'm skating on the edge of my knowledge too, because I'm just a humble science teacher, retired. Now, have we got any fossilized dinosaur eyes that we can examine the retinas of and see whether they've got cones?
No, not to my knowledge. That there are no fossilized dinosaur eyes to my knowledge. Soft parts usually decay, of course.
Yes.
So we only usually have the bones. Now,
yes,
there's been an increasing body of evidence over probably the last 20 years to suggest that actually some proteins, or the breakdown products of some proteins, can actually survive geologic timescales. So that's very exciting. It's very interesting. We don't fully understand, or I'm not sure we at all understand, the chemical basis for why these proteins are surviving. So things like keratin, the breakdown products of keratin, the breakdown products of hemoglobin have been found in the fossil record. And when you actually look at those, they are the original proteins.
Wow.
So they are the breakdown products of these original proteins. So they're not replaced, which is pretty amazing.
It is, yes.
Whole organs have never been found. So we don't have the whole organ of anything. There was a report that there was a dinosaur heart found. That turned out to be an ironstone nodule.
Yes.
And there was recently described a sort of fossilized brain. Maybe there was some aspects of the brain kind of structure in this thing, but it was I'm not sure too much about it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But no other, really, really good organs have been preserved.
No. Well, you're talking about proteins that have been preserved there, but of course, it would be more exciting to find DNA.
Well, it would be, but you have seen Jurassic Park, right? You do know what happens when we find DNA. And also, I would have a job then, so I don't know. Happily for me, the oldest DNA in the fossil record is about 1 million years old. And of course, dinosaurs died out 66 million years ago. So at the moment, we are some way away from finding DNA preserved that's anywhere near as old as the dinosaurs.
Yes.
I'm not going to say never, because I think these soft tissue discoveries that are being made are really fascinating and really exciting, and people are discovering new things every year. But at the moment, there is no DNA for you.
Right. Okay. What a shame. So I'm going to put a question up that's come in here.
Why are dinosaur skulls so? Why dinosaur skulls are so rare to find when compared to other dinosaur bones? Good question. Well, dinosaur skulls are made up of many, 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 many bones. So they're all, I don't even know how many, more than 20 bones make up the skull of a dinosaur. And all of these bones are very thin, they're very fragile, they're very delicate. Now think of a big leg bone. It's just a big, chunky single bone. So these fragile bones are much harder to preserve. Often when the animal dies, all these individual skull bones will fall apart. And they can also be crushed, although we could still find them if they were crushed. But they'll fall apart, that the skull disassociates, and they just crumble away, and they're just difficult to find. So big chunky leg bones, they're quite easy to find. Very, very, very fine, delicate bones, they're much, much more difficult to find, and that's why dinosaur skulls are more rare. But some dinosaurs, for example, things like Triceratops, their skulls don't fall apart. The bones of their skulls are fused together when they're adults, and actually we've got tons of Triceratops skulls because they're massive, they're big and they're chunky.
Yeah, tough skulls.
Yeah.
I think this next person hasn't asked a question, but he may know you.
Hi, Ali. How long do you think dinosaurs might have ruled the Earth if they had not been wiped out by Meteor? That's a great question. I mean, there's been a lot of research recently. Actually, Ali, who just said hi, Ali, hi, Susie, he has done this research very recently to show to have a look at whether the dinosaurs were decreasing in diversity before the end of the Cretaceous. So there was kind of this narrative for a long time that the dinosaurs were doing pretty badly at the end of the Cretaceous period, and the meteor was the straw that broke the camel's back. And actually, a lot of research now has suggested that that's really not the case, and that probably the dinosaurs were doing just fine, and that when the meteor hit, it wasn't just it wiped them out, and it wasn't just a straw that broke the camel's back. And some really cool research that's been done looking at kind of ecological niches going into the period after the Cretaceous period, which is called the Paleogene. In the early part of the Paleogene, looking at the sort of niches, the environments that dinosaurs could have occupied in North America has suggested that actually the environments were almost more favorable for dinosaurs after the mass extinction than they were before. So I think that the dinosaurs would have continued to thrive. I don't think there's any reason why they would have got extinct. Obviously, there was some major climate changes in the Oligocene when we have big ice sheets growing in Alaska, and we really transitioned into this ice house climate. And I don't know how the dinosaurs would have done then. I mean, the mammals did all right, but who knows? I don't know. But I think if it wasn't for the meteor, dinosaurs would have carried on dominating terrestrial ecosystems.
Yes. Well, you sparked off so many responses now, because for a start, they weren't properly cold-blooded, were they?
So another good question, another one that's very difficult to answer. Cold-blooded and warm-blooded are kind of end members or the spectrum, really. So we don't have
poikilothermic and homeothermic.
Yeah, but okay. So we have things that can control their internal body temperature and things that rely on external the external environment, poikilothermic and homeothermic. But if you
we can all go out and sunbathe, can't we? And we don't have to produce so much heat ourselves.
Yeah, quite. So it is a spectrum, and also if you were brave enough to take a thermometer and go and shove it up an alligator's bottom, you would find that the core temperature of an alligator doesn't vary that much. Although we think of alligators as being cold-blooded, they have a very they're large animals. They have a small surface area to volume ratio, so they don't lose their heat very effectively, very efficiently.
And they're in water too, which is a more constant environment.
That's a good point.
I think we ought to put out a warning here. Don't try this at home.
Don't do that. But if you find an alligator, probably don't. But the dinosaurs were massive. Many of the dinosaurs were very, very large, and probably their biggest problem actually would have been losing their metabolic heat. So you generate your heat through everything you do, through eating and through moving, and actually losing that heat would have probably been a bit of a problem for them.
They didn't have fans, did they?
They didn't have fans.
No.
So, you know, whilst they were not warm-blooded, or, well, we don't know. Birds are warm-blooded. So somewhere
Yes.
along the line to birds, warm-bloodedness evolved. And exactly where that is, we don't know. But another thing that we do know is that many of the dinosaurs, the meat-eating dinosaurs, were feathered. And it has been suggested that feathers, I mean, they certainly didn't evolve for flight, because the first feathers that we see in the fossil record are not flight feathers. And they're sort of like wispy, almost hair-like structures. And it's been suggested that they actually evolved to keep the to keep the animals warm, so that they may well, like mammalian hair, have been for thermoregulation. So probably warm-bloodedness evolved somewhere along that line to birds within the meat-eating dinosaurs. So animals like Triceratops and Stegosaurus, probably not warm-blooded in the classic sense, but probably had an elevated metabolism relative to lizards and things like that.
Yes, it's a spectrum, isn't it? Because whereas a tortoise might be entirely dependent upon radiated heat, that it gets up in the morning and goes and sits in the sun, warms up and becomes more active, and then as the day goes into the evening, it goes back into the sun, whereas it's been in the shade happily all day, and it might, when it's too hot, it goes back into the sun to warm itself up for night. People don't understand that. They think of it as a one or the other, polarized, cold or hot. But yes, it's a very good answer. So the other thing that you made me think of is this meteor business. I read a recent article about how we've just discovered apparently that there were frequent meteors, little ones, throughout the period of the dinosaurs. We weren't previously aware that there was this shower of meteors, but we now have come upon some evidence that suggests there might have been. But we're actually talking about a really big impact for extinction, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I might get the numbers wrong. I mean, the impact crater, I think, is 150 kilometers across. I think that's right. I think the impactor is supposed to be around 50 kilometers across. It's in that sort of region. So huge, huge thing. We're not talking just, a little lump of rock. We're talking a vast thing. And,
a city.
A city. And this thing impacted just off the Gulf of Mexico, within the Gulf of Mexico, just off the coast of Mexico. And it impacted into rock that was carbonates and sulfates. And what this did was then vaporize that rock. And then when it rained, it actually rained acid rain back down because those rocks were vaporized. Obviously, in the immediate vicinity of the Gulf of Mexico, there would be huge tsunamis. There have been also large forest fires, huge amounts of fires. There would have been magnitude 11 earthquakes rocking probably all the way around the world.
Volcanic eruptions?
Well, it's been suggested that it could have set off some volcanic eruptions. Difficult to demonstrate. You have to be able to date the volcanic eruptions extremely precisely, which usually we can do, but it hasn't. It's not certain, but potentially. But also, it would have basically thrown so much dust into the atmosphere that it would have caused a great deal of global dimming, and this would have resulted in a lot of plant life dying off. Just because the plants couldn't photosynthesize. So there were probably numerous kill mechanisms. And depending on where animals were around the globe, those kill mechanisms probably took different length of time to affect them. But probably the extinction took no more than 100 years or something like that. So it was geologically instantaneous, but probably all of the dinosaurs went extinct within that sort of time frame.
All the big ones,
Or the non-avian dinosaurs.
Yes. Yes, because of course the dust cloud would have gone round the Earth probably near the middle, because of the Gulf of Mexico, which is the crater, effectively, isn't it?
No, it's not. It's just off offshore. It's a bit smaller than the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah, it's just off the Yucatan Peninsula, and it's actually buried in sediment, the crater now. So it was discovered by seismic profiling, so scanning the subsurface with sound waves, and they were able to discover the crater actually within the sediment. So it's not exposed at the surface of the Earth.
Yes, yes, because of course under the water you get a lot of sediment all the time, don't you? Yes. So, Stegosaurs. What are those plates on its back for?
Another excellent question that I don't have an answer for. There have been lots of different ideas. Going back to the warm-blooded, cold-blooded discussion. Stegosaurus. So stegosaurs are actually a group of dinosaurs that have around 14 or 15 different members, not just Stegosaurus. So everybody knows Stegosaurus, of course, it's one of the most iconic dinosaurs. But actually, the first stegosaur found was found in Swindon in a brick pit. So there you go. They're known. I know. Who thought? But they're known from all around the world.
I knew Swindon must be famous for something.
I don't know that Swindon is famous for that, but yeah. Anyway,
apologies to all those people from Swindon who are watching.
Yeah, I'm sure it's very nice.
Yes.
I don't know where I was now. Oh yeah, Stegosaurus. Stegosaurus had really big, kind of very broad, triangular shaped plates. Well, it seems that lots of the other stegosaurs probably just had kind of more spike-like plates. So people have suggested that Stegosaurus itself might have used its plates to help radiate this metabolic heat that it was building up. And this seems like a sensible suggestion, but it's super hard to test. So people have kind of calculated the surface area of the plates and done some kind of, fairly assumption-filled calculations, and have suggested that, it might have worked. But it's very difficult to test that. But I don't think that the other stegosaurs actually had the surface area to volume ratio of those plates to use them as heat radiators, because they were much more spike-like. Now they might, lots of these sort of structures in animals are actually used for more than one function. And so even crocodilian scutes, which are the kind of bony scutes and the bony plates in the back of a crocodile, they even can use them for some thermoregulation. So probably stegosaurs did something with them to do with that kind of thing, but it probably wasn't the reason that they evolved. One of the things that I've noticed a lot in working on all these different stegosaurs from around the world is that they all have quite different shaped plates for different species. It's difficult because stegosaurs, despite being such iconic dinosaurs, we don't actually have a very good fossil record of them. They're really, really rare as fossils. So we only have something like 5 or 6 complete skeletons of stegosaurs from probably 2, maybe 3 species. So we really don't have a good fossil record of them at all. So it's a little bit difficult, but it looks like they had kind of different shaped plates, all of the different species. And so I think that it could be something, again, to do with sex. It could be something to do with interspecific recognition, making sure you're mating with the right people, potentially in an ecosystem where maybe more than one of these species were living alongside each other. It could be some sort of display function, either sexual display or possibly to kind of deter predators. So one of the things that we probably do know about these dinosaurs is that they weren't runners. Their limbs are not built in a manner that would have allowed them to move very quickly at all. They had very short strides with their forelimbs, so they probably couldn't move very fast at all. So I don't think that they were bounding across the plains like a gazelle, outrunning an Allosaurus. I think that wasn't happening. So they had to defend themselves in some way, and they have these spikes at the end of the tail, which would have been a very fearsome weapon. And there's actually a few fossils where we've got bones of Allosaurus that have sort of have been healed. They've got holes in or pathologies where it looks like a stegosaur tail spike is actually impacted, and then the bone is healed around the spike. So it's pretty cool fossils. So it's possible that Stegosaurus was using its tail as a weapon, but it might also have used its plates just to make it look bigger and more scary. So I was in a museum studying a stegosaur in Australia one time, and they were it was on part of a traveling exhibition, and they were taking it down. And I went in and saw it on the first day, and it had all its plates up. And then as they took the plates off, and as they took it down, they took the plates off first, and suddenly it just looked much smaller. The animal it just looked like a much smaller animal. And so I just wondered, is this something that maybe they were using to just make themselves look big and scary? But all of those ideas are just untestable, basically. So it's really hard to say.
Did it look much tastier without the?
It looked equally as dusty and bony, to be honest with you.
Yes, it reminds me of those caterpillars that have hair all over them. I think that may be designed to make them unpleasant in the mouth.
Right.
So
right.
you know, if you've got a lot of spiky bits over you, it deters biting.
It does, but I think, you know, particularly Stegosaurus with these very thin plates. Now they were bone, they were very thin bone, and then they were probably covered in a layer of keratin. Now I think if you're Allosaurus with a bone crunching bite, and people have measured the bite force of Allosaurus, and we know it can crunch through bone.
Yes.
I think it would have been like eating a pack of Pringles, to be honest, just chomping through a Stegosaurus backbone. I'm not sure it would have put up much of a challenge. So that's why I think that they're probably display structures. I suspect that they evolved from structures that were real armor. So they probably did protect the back of the animals. But these very, very hypertrophied spines, they're restricted just to the very back. There's nothing on the sides of the animal. It just, you know, it doesn't look like the ultimate arrangement for a set of armor, you know, and they actually seem to have lost that armor on the sides of their body. So I think it's probably a display structure of some form. But as I say, very hard to test.
Well, now you've mentioned Pringles, I've got to say that other potato snacks are available.
Yeah, maybe we can get some sponsorship in here.
So here we have another question. What is this here? Oh, this is an interesting question.
Why in all those millions of years did the dinosaurs not seem to develop higher order brain functions like ours? Well, nor have any other animals, I would say. And there are kind of different types of intelligence, I guess. So birds use tools, crows use tools.
Yes. Despite having very tiny brains, even tiny in ratio to the size of their body.
Yeah, I mean, dinosaurs had really, really tiny brains in comparison to their body mass. I think I read somewhere, I don't know whether it's true, that Stegosaurus had the smallest brain per unit of body mass of any animal, any terrestrial vertebrate, which is quite.
Well, there's a claim to fame.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know why we evolved. These sorts of our intelligence. I don't know how that happens, and I suspect we're the odd ones out, not the dinosaurs. There are all sorts of different animals that haven't, but only the primates did, and I don't know why that's the case. But I don't think the dinosaurs are to blame.
Well, why is that impossible question to answer for anybody, let alone scientists, isn't it?
I think it is. Yeah.
So is there, I've heard somewhere that some of the really large dinosaurs had another brain in their tail. Is that correct?
Not really. Again,
not
this
really
is
a brain
that comes from Stegosaurus. Actually, it's such an icon of a dinosaur, but actually other dinosaurs did have it too. So what they have is in their sacrum, which are the vertebrae that attach to the hip region. They have the neural canal. So your neural canal is the bit where the sort of your spinal cord runs through, and that is expanded in some of these dinosaurs. And early on, sort of, in the latter part of the 19th century, this was suggested to be a second brain, and it was actually somewhat larger than the actual brain of these dinosaurs. It probably wasn't really a brain. It might well have been a collection of nerves that help control the back legs. Many animals actually have a kind of expanded area there in the sacrum. So I don't think it really was a second brain,
no. No, a giant ganglion.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Well, I'm going to put up some more questions here because we're coming towards the end of our time. Somebody wants to know. We don't have this person's name, unfortunately. Do you have a dinosaur top trumps?
I don't have dinosaur top trumps. Who was my favourite? Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have it. And you know, I even have a 7-year-old and she doesn't have it either. She likes living animals, not really dinosaurs.
So you're an equal opportunity dinosaur lover.
Well, my favourite dinosaur is Stegosaurus, as you might have guessed. So I would probably go for that one.
Great. And do you have a favourite fossil? Because when we were talking to Dinosaur Isle people, Alex in particular had found a really stunning fossil, which was his favourite because he'd found it. And he was very proud. Do you have one of those?
I kind of have two equal favourites. Is that okay?
Sure, yeah.
So my first one, I've mentioned one of them already. It's the Stegosaur found from Swindon. My Stegosaur found from Swindon is, it was a specimen that I worked on a lot during my PhD, and I spent many hours with it during that time, so I feel quite close to it. And it's on display in the Natural History Museum, and it's in the Marine Reptile Gallery, and on one wall there's all these incredible specimens of complete marine reptiles, and they're stunning. I mean, they just take people's breath away. If you haven't been, you must come and have a look. We're reopening on the 5th of August, by the way. And yes. It's this specimen, this poor Stegosaur is on the other side. People just kind of walk past it on the way to the canteen. They don't notice, but it is one of the earliest dinosaurs found from the UK. I love it. So that's my one. And my second is also a Stegosaur, and that is Sophie the Stegosaurus. And Sophie the Stegosaurus is the world's most complete stegosaur, and it's also on display at the Natural History Museum. So when you come in the exhibition road entrance, which is the kind of side entrance to the museum, you are faced with Sophie as you walk through the door. It's a very spectacular and evocative mount.
Yes.
And it's actually the real fossil as well. The real bones are there. So many of the fossils actually in our dinosaur gallery are casts, so they're copies of the real thing.
Yes.
But Sophie, we have all of the bones up. And as I say, it's the world's most complete stegosaur, and I got to study it for a year before it went on display when the museum acquired the specimen. So it's really a great specimen.
You've got a relationship.
I have, and I recommend you come and see it if you haven't done so.
Well, yes, and I like the side entrance because it's nearer the tube station, where you've got that walkway through, haven't you? So, what's happened to Dipy?
Dipy. So Dipy, our Diplodocus, has been on tour. Dipy came off display about 2.5 years ago, I think 3 years ago, and has been on display around the UK. And it's been great, actually. He's been to all I should say, I was calling him he, but we don't know whether it was a he or a she. Actually, it was 5 separate individuals, so it could have been both. But anyway, it's been on display all around the UK. It's currently in Rochdale. The tour was shut down, obviously, for COVID. But it's going to finish in Rochdale, and then I think it's moving. The next stop on the tour is Lincoln Cathedral. So Dipy's been all around the UK. It's been over to Belfast, and it's been really, really great because I guess people from all over the UK who maybe don't normally come down to London have been able to enjoy Dipy, and it's been great for the local museums as well. Really helped with visitor numbers to some of the local museums. So it's been a fantastic tour, and it's a great specimen. You know, it really is. It is huge. I've been to a couple of the venues. I was up in Newcastle. Where with Dipy, and I was also in Belfast, and the museums have done some lovely displays around it. They've all done their own kind of interesting interpretations around the specimen, and it's been fascinating to see. So I thoroughly recommend it.
Dipy's on tour.
He is.
Here's a question from Tavian. He's been on our show before now.
Out that Spinosaurus was semi-aquatic. Spinosaurs are a type of meat-eating dinosaur. They've long been known, and they're known from dinosaurs that have a very long, low snout. Now, we have actually a Spinosaur from the UK. It's called Baryonyx. It's the holotype specimen, which we have at the Natural History Museum, is one of the most complete dinosaurs ever found in Europe, the meat-eating dinosaurs ever found in Europe. And it has a very long, low snout. It has teeth that look just like a crocodile. It's actually quite difficult. You have to really know what you're looking at to be able to tell Baryonyx teeth and crocodile teeth apart. Its snout looks like a crocodile. It's got nostrils elevated up on top of its head. It looks like a dinosaur that was feeding in and around water. And it had long been interpreted to be a piscivorous animal anyway. So when they came out, Nizar and his team came out and said, you know, Spinosaurus, we think it's aquatic, it's got some aquatic adaptations. Like, everyone went crazy, and I was like, why? I mean, dinosaurs, they occupied all the terrestrial niches. There were flying dinosaurs, there were burrowing dinosaurs. Why shouldn't there be an aquatic dinosaur? Why is that surprising? And I didn't really understand it. And then recently these are again published this beautiful tale, which it just looks like a paddle. I mean, the thing looks like a massive newt. It's amazing. And you know, I don't understand what the problem is, honestly. I think it makes sense. That these animals are found in environments where we find lots of crocs. They kind of look like crocs. They've been found with fish in their stomach. So what's the problem? So I think it's cool, but I wasn't, you know, I'm not in this sort of camp of people who are going, oh my God, it can't be true.
No, it wasn't exactly breaking news for you, was it?
Well, it was still extremely cool. I actually got to see the paper a little bit before it came out because I was asked to comment on it by National Geographic. So I got a heads up. But it's very, very cool.
Yeah. So there's no way of telling whether they're salt or freshwater, is there?
Well, we can look at the rocks. So we can tell what sort of environment the rocks were deposited in. So there in the Chem, it's been interpreted as a probably a freshwater environment. So, you know, there's lots of things like crocs in it. There's lots of fish and other things, but it's sort of freshwater or lagoonal, I think, is generally considered to be the depositional setting. So, so it's probably, you know, something that was living in rivers, big rivers and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm going to give you an opportunity to do a plug now, because as you said, we're about to open the Natural History Museum.
Yeah, okay, so we are opening our doors to the public on the 5th of August. We're very much looking forward to seeing everyone back, and you have to book tickets, but of course they're free. We're asking visitors to please wear masks, and most of our galleries are open, but not all of them. Can I also plug our website? So we also have, so John's showing the website here, and we also have a great dinosaur specific website, which is Discover and then Dinosaurs. And there's loads of resources on this. So if you have inquisitive children, young children, or actually there's a lot of content for adults as well, or teenagers, then we have a load of different content. Our digital teams have done an amazing job over lockdown, actually kind of updating this and doing some really great stuff on it. But we do have lots and lots of content on there all the time. We write a two weekly blog, which goes on here. So there's lots and lots of things to find and see, and interesting stories that I hope you'll enjoy.
Fantastic. And you have been wonderful. Thank you very much. I hope well, I hope you've enjoyed it too.
I have. Great questions. Thank you.
Good, good. And maybe if we ask you nicely, you might be prepared to come back another day?
Of course, always delighted to.
Excellent. Now, I want to tell everybody else that next Wednesday, we have Professor Lee Cronin from Glasgow University, and the subject we're going to be discussing and dealing with is abiogenesis. So be prepared for that. 8 o'clock, Wednesday, next week. Susie, thank you very much. Take the rest of the day off.
Bye.
Bye-bye.